Hello everyone, welcome to episode... Welcome to episode 161 of Let's Plant. My name's Chuck. The previous episode came out about 3 weeks ago and it has been raining a lot, so the ground has never been dry enough for me to work on. You'll also notice me wearing this thick jacket because somehow, even though it's only autumn here in the southern hemisphere, we're currently having very cold days. It's currently about 10 to 11 degrees Celsius, which is around 51 Fahrenheit. So, but anyway, we're here now ending the short hiatus, so let's start. Because of COVID-19 and the lockdowns, I'm sure many of you can relate, but my routine these days is mainly just spent at home. So that means working from home, Zoom meetings online, and playing with the kids, that sort of thing. This pretty much means that for me, I've been spending a lot of my time sitting in front of my computer. Now, for those who don't know, I am a web developer by profession. Keeping indoors most of the time, I started working on a new project with a friend of mine. We released it sometime last week, and you know what, we're really quite proud of it. So I hope you don't mind a cheeky little plug right here. I've been working on a COVID-19 tracker since the Holy Week long weekend. You could find it at coronavirus.makeitsimimpler.com.au. This tracker shows you the global active cases, confirmed deaths and recoveries, and scrolling down the homepage you would see a quick summary of the countries with top cases, deaths and recoveries. Scrolling a bit more, you would see daily movement in terms of new cases per day, new deaths per day, surge of new cases, and surge of new deaths. And if you're on desktop or at least a full HD display, you would be able to see this button to take you to the comparison panel, which shows you a more detailed version of the comparison. This tool allows you to compare the stats of various countries. You get access to a bunch of metrics and stats, including the per capita and a growth factor. Additionally, there's a charts function which allows you to compare the curve of the different countries. Right now, we're looking at the daily confirmed metric. You could switch to various metrics as needed. In chart settings, you could change the scale from linear to logarithmic, and that would update the chart accordingly. You could also filter by first case, so this would adjust the graphs to show from the very first case it was reported rather than just chronological. And you could also go from the first 100 cases to see the relative growth from the first 100, because usually it's from the first 100 confirmed cases that you start seeing the rapid growth or rapid spread of the epidemic. And as you can see at the top here, it says beta. This is still in active development and we are continuously adding new features into this program. Again, if you're interested, this is found at coronavirus.makeitsimimpler.com.au, and please do check it out. Thank you. Now back to Cerriscapades. As I mentioned, it has been raining quite a lot for the past few weeks. We had a very wet April, and I think it's going to be the same for the next few weeks, so I'm going to expect a wet May as well. So as you could imagine, this has prevented me from doing any landscaping right now, and that's mainly because I do not want to freeze outdoors in the cold while it's raining, and at the same time, it's not really wise to play with cuttings with wet soil. So really, I do not have a choice. Several people were asking me how my plants are doing with the rains and all, and I told them that my plants are as good as they can be. Nothing really changed. They're well established, they're growing happily, and they can't believe it. I've already talked about this in several videos in the past, but I think it's about time I have a dedicated video on the topic. So let's talk about rains. So when trying to deal with rains, the first thing that I always recommend is having a look at your soil preparations. What you want is a thick layer of loose soil. Now, I've already gone through the entire soil composition thing in one of my other videos, so I'm just going to link to that episode. But assuming you already know how to loosen your soil, then all you have to do really is to create a thick layer of it in the ground. That's if you're planning to do the same as I do and landscape in the ground. There are a few ways to go about it, and I think one of the easiest ways is just to create a raised bed. Could be something as simple as this, where you just create a border or retaining wall, using any material you could find. In this case, I just used some large rocks as my retaining border, then just filled the entire thing with soil. Now, how high should we go? My general rule of the thumb is that the depth should at least be somewhere where somewhere deeper than the roots can go. I generally have a good idea of how deep the Echeveria roots are going because I've already dealt with them. I've already uprooted them so many times in the past. For this one, I think this is about 15 to 20 centimeters, or maybe around 6 inches roughly. So somewhere around that height would be more or less usable. I know that this could be a problem for some people because that means you would need a lot of soil to backfill the entire plot. So another technique that you could use just to achieve the thick layer of soil is to dig down. So let's say you only elevate by 10 centimeters, then you dig down another 5 centimeters, and overall you still have the 15. And this technique is really good because it would easily get you over the 15 centimeter mark that I generally try to follow. So yeah, dig down and backfill on top of it. I guess it mainly depends on what type of materials you would have for your retaining wall. We just discussed the first aspect of soil preparation, which is basically preparing a thick enough layer for your soil mix. The second aspect that I would like to discuss is the slope or the direction of the soil. Now, the slope is necessary because it helps direct the flow of water, any excess water that is in contact with your plants. In other words, flooding. Now, there's something that I call the flood test, which is basically me pouring a lot of water or flooding the entire plot and seeing where the water flows. The idea is that I would like the water to flow away from the plants, or at least flow downwards, and not have it pool around the plant. Because as you know, keeping succulents constantly wet is a very bad thing. So as you can see, having the combination of loose soil and the slope prevents my plants from getting waterlogged. If you have your plants in pots and want to keep them outdoors, then consider using porous pots such as terracotta or clay, maybe concrete. I'm not sure what other porous pots there are, but anyway, anything that's not sealed. That way, water can escape not only from the bottom holes but also through the walls. I'm holding up this Echeveria Romeo. This is quite notorious for rotting, especially during summer when it's really warm and fungus are really active. I have my Romeo in a very loose soil mix and in a terracotta pot, as you can see, so that's making doubly sure that it doesn't stay wet for too long. If you live in a climate with well-defined seasons, then you would also want to know when the active and the dormant periods of your plants are. In this case, I have my aeoniums here on my left. These are all winter growers, which means that right now, as I mentioned, it's quite cold, so all of them are growing. As you can see, they're opening up their rosettes, and yeah, they're happily enjoying the rainwater. So these things, they want to get as wet as they could right now because they are using all of that water to create their food and to grow. On the other hand, my Echeveria are summer growers, which means that they tend to be dormant at lower temperatures, and that should be happening right now. I have to be extra careful that they do not get too much water, not more than they need, because otherwise it would lead to rot. So making sure that they have a very loose soil, the soil is free draining and there's no waterlogging, no flooding happening, then they would be fine. But if you're not confident about your soil mix, or you haven't had enough time to work on replacing the soil, then as a last resort, you could probably create a shade structure or a cover that would prevent excess water from coming in contact with the soil. Or if you have a structure somewhere in your garden, you could just place some sort of netting to reduce the amount of water or precipitation on the plants, or even go as far as placing a transparent PVC or roofing, anything that would completely block water from coming down. But in my garden, cover is a last resort because I am very confident with my soil mix and I want them to get used to the elements all year round. Something that you would have to watch out for during the rainy months would be fungus. If you have a look in here, some of the leaves are falling off. They're detaching because, as you can see, the tips have rotted. This is fungal rot. Luckily for me, this is not stem and root rot. It's just superficial. It's just on the leaves themselves. And it's mainly to do with the amount of moisture that it's trapping, which brings me to a very important point. You have to provide them with enough airflow to keep the whole thing dry. So even if it rains, as long as you give them enough space in between, there would be some spaces for air or wind to be directed into, and that would help keep the whole thing dry. So even if it rains every single day, as long as your plants have enough airflow around them, then the winds would help them shake off any of the excess moisture, making it fall onto the soil. And if you have well-draining soil, then the soil wouldn't stay wet for too long. Now going back to fungus, To help combat fungus, of course, prevention is better than cure. So as a preventive measure, what I usually do is to remove the dead leaves or any leaves that have already succumbed to the rot and hope it doesn't spread elsewhere. Luckily, I checked early on, so there's not a lot of leaves or plants that are rotting right now. So we're good on that front. You would also want to apply fungicides, but the thing with fungicides is that they have to be applied when it is not wet, when it is not raining, because otherwise they would just be washed away, reducing the effectiveness. Unfortunately for me, we're expecting some rains over the next few days, so I haven't started on my first round of antifungals. So yeah, I might have to wait a while for that. If your plants are in pots, something that you could do is to tilt them, and to do that you could just grab a piece of rock or anything that you could stick on one end. That way you're creating a slope within the pot and any excess water would be flowing outwards or at least away from the plant. Another effect of this is that any water caught on the crown might be able to slide off through the help of gravity. Otherwise, if your plants are in the ground, you could just plant them at a slight angle. The effect would be more or less the same. If you have a lot of plants, whether in pots or in the ground, it is quite impractical trying to water beneath the leaves and directly on the stem or on the roots, because it would just take you a whole lot of time. Now in my case, I would just water on top of them, directly on top of them, and it's the same case whether it's raining or if I water with my hose. My plants will get drenched, they stay wet, but they do not stay wet for long because I applied all the things that I told you just now. So I gave my plants the chance to dry off, whether that would be gravity assisted through the use of slopes or angles, or giving them enough airflow by removing as much of the obstructions that I could remove. And with that being said, I think I'm going to make a lot of you scream in terror when I do this. Wow! My plants enjoy this. So those are just some of the things that I do to cope with the rain and excess moisture that my plants are experiencing. I hope you learned a lot from this video, and if you do, please leave a like and please do subscribe because I have a lot of videos planned. I'm just not sure when they would arrive because, as I said, it's constantly raining and I do not get the chance to do any landscaping. But rest assured, they will come. So I'll see you in the next episode, which I don't know when, so goodbye! Some of you wanted to see how my plants are doing after all of the rains that we've been getting, so here you go.